So, hey everybody, we are live. It's Stuart Little here, and once again joined by Dahlia from Euphoric Coaching. This is episode 3 of the 3 sets of conversations around what we're doing with strengths, and today we're going to focus on leadership. So I guess we've kind of worked through a little bit of a presentation stuff for you guys to talk to just give it a little bit of illustration and flavor. Okay, so hey Dahlia, how are you?
I'm good, Stuart. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well. Coming to you on Easter Friday. So
yeah.
All right. I hope your preparation.
Good to be here and good to have this next session. After our strengths-based selling.
Yeah. So we've done kind of like the overview. We've done this a bit about how it applies to sales and now leadership. So I think I know this is a bit of a favorite for you. So I'm looking for some.
It's so close to my heart. It's so close to my heart.
Yeah, exactly. All right, crack it on. We'll crack into it.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess, look, this is strengths and leadership. So we really want to just touch on how this kind of comes together from the leader's perspective. Now, we're very mindful that things are changing in the leadership space and in many respects have changed in the leadership space, but there's still a number of businesses out there who may be considering their options, especially in today's climate. So we're kind of hoping that this adds some value around that and certainly some insights for you, but I'll let you crack on, Dahlia.
Yeah, so now more so in organizations that are, and also like how things are moving so quickly in business, right? You work in very dynamic and agile environment. More so now, leaders are focusing on strengths. And I have this statement I always say: if you don't have time to develop your people, and if it takes longer for your people to apply what they learn from the training, why don't you just let them play to their strengths, because it's already their innate natural strengths, right?
Yeah.
And that would be faster for them to accelerate and get on board and quickly perform. So more leaders now, more organizations now are becoming more aware about applying the positive psychology and putting people in the right fit based on their strengths. So we talked about we talked about the strengths themes. We also want to talk about here how leaders understand their strengths and understanding the strengths of their team members and how leaders can lead with strengths, but also leveraging the strengths of their team members. Then that's how it will serve the leader to quickly get the team to perform, and also to connect the team together faster and just understanding who contributes what to the team and to to the organization and to the success of achieving your goal and your mission.
Yeah.
Right. So just a recap here, Stuart, on the Clifton strengths. The strength that we've been talking about here is not the muscle strength, but really the innate talent and your strengths, how you lead with executing, you're influencing. Are you leading with relationship building or strategic thinking? So maybe, Stuart, if you're a leader, based on your dominant strengths domain, how would you lead? How do you lead? What do you lead with?
Yeah, each of these bring a different angle in respect to that. I mean, some leaders will definitely focus in some areas rather than others, which is just a way of how things work. But ultimately, I'm with you. This is just the overview. We've done some really good stuff on this in the prior 2 videos. So if you're keen to know more, the details are there. But I think that how this shows up for a leader is really, really vital, because then that sets the tone of how you can work with the rest of the team to actually complement what they do. So yeah, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have last time we looked at your dominant domain, you lead with strategic thinking, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you lead with strategic thinking as a leader, Stuart? Maybe you can share.
Well, so for me, it's about having the plan in place. You know, having a safe and clearly thought out plan that kind of that adopts all angles, so that you can understand exactly what the goal is going to look like. So you can bring people on board with that strategy, and you can communicate that effectively.
Right. You have strategic number one.
Yeah.
But knowing strategic thinking is your dominant domain. But what also do you learn from here that you need your team to complement you, that is not your dominant, but more like, your least domain?
Yeah.
Um,
So for me,
who would you
I'd be
move in
looking
your
at.
team?
Yeah, I'd be looking for more people to help with the executing and maybe the influencing side. For me,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I tend to. I'm strong in relationship, influencing, and executing on my top five, but strategic with the lead. But I know that execution is where I really can need help and assistance. So this is when we ran through this in the first video. This is where you were able to assist me. So
Yeah.
like we just look at when we were doing the one-to-one, but when you then looked at the team dynamic and how that comes together in a sales team, really insightful in respect of building that wider picture. So yeah, for sure, it's great to fill those in, right?
Yeah, so every leaders, they have their own dominant domains, strengths domain that they lead with, and then you want to see who else in your team will complement you with the other three, that are also their dominant. So then then in a team you have all four dominant. So your strategic thinking, I'm dominant in influencing and executing. That's how I complement you, and you can do this. You lead the strategic thinking,
Yeah,
and then I do the influencing and executing. That's how teamwork, playing to strengths.
yeah,
Yeah. So moving on, there's this book, also written by, published by Gallup, right, on strengths-based leadership. So I would really recommend anyone, whether you're a leader or not. And I always believe, like, even if you're not managing anyone, if you're not leading anyone, you're still leading yourself. You still need
yeah,
to manage yourself. So I believe that everyone has to take ownership of your own leadership. You need to develop yourself in that. You lead yourself. There are people who say also that you are the CEO of your life, right?
yeah,
And I feel like, not only for any leadership book, also, like, you should, anyone who's not even managing people, should look into reading books, and learning about leadership, how you can lead people, because in your life you'll definitely have to lead someone, if it's not your siblings or your peers. It doesn't have to be a title that you're a manager or you're a CEO or you're a CFO and you have a team under you, right?
yeah.
So yeah, so this is one book we recommend, all the viewers here to read. Right. So we talk about investing in your strengths. First is all of us as leaders need to invest in developing our strengths first before we invest in developing the strengths of our team members. So that's a nice infographic video, strength from the book Strength Based Leadership, that we found on YouTube, Stuart.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll add that for sure. But this was a screen grab I did of that. But I thought
yes.
for me, it sums it up brilliantly, right? In respect to the three focus areas, so that invest in your strengths, maximize your team, and understand why people follow. If you kind of have those three things in your mind all the time, then you're able to really build a really comprehensive view. And as you can see from this, there's multi facets to that.
Yeah. So you can also, our viewers here can also besides reading the book, you can also quickly just go on YouTube and look for this, and you'll get the full infographic explanation on the whole strengths-based leadership, on first investing in your strengths, and then after that, how do you learn the strengths of your team and learn to maximize and leverage your team, but what goes around that, right? And then also, of course, always understand the why, right? Why would people follow you as a leader? Excuse me. Okay, so here are some supporting information. We talked about working in groups, working together as a team and maximizing the strengths of team. You want to share your thoughts on how teams are now working more in a very agile environment, Stuart?
Yeah, so certainly. So obviously, I've had some experience in working in this particular space, in this domain, and I know that this is becoming ever more the approach that people are now taking. I think that what's happened in the scenario that we're now in, we've kind of been forced into this situation in some ways of how we group together, and that kind of understanding of how people are, how they're performing, what it is they can do to help. I think there's definitely a shift towards that. So if people are not so familiar with that working environment, then this has given them an opportunity to perhaps change and adapt to that a little bit. But certainly, I think that the strength even in these images, you can see that you've got people who are attentively looking at what's going on in those particular examples. And my experience of working in this kind of environment where you're actually responsible to one another, and you're working through a particular challenge or a problem or something that you're trying to deliver for a customer, whatever it may be. What's the new market, whatever it may be you're exploring. These are really powerful ways of actually getting collective thought together, and more importantly, gaining information from people who perhaps wouldn't have had that say in the past. What you get and where the value comes from this is you actually get everybody's voice heard, and I think that's extremely powerful. And from the leader's perspective, what it allows them to be is that voice in amongst that crew. It's not necessarily the person who is the only person who has a valid opinion, or is necessarily the person who has the best point. This is often in this case, it's the person who is able to bring everyone together and then consolidate a number of thoughts. And I think that's maybe the skill set that you bring to the table, having that leadership mantle, but it doesn't mean you're always right. So I think this way of working is extremely powerful because you recognize the full potential of your team and
Yeah, and most of the time, sometimes leaders feel pressured. Also, we didn't know. Like sometimes you don't know that actually leaders feel pressured to always feel like they need to always lead and come up with brilliant ideas. That's not the case. A leader who's fully aware of his own strengths and his potential and his blind spots, and also aware of the strengths of his team members, it would give him more confidence to just let the team lead. And sometimes it's just the job of a leader to facilitate conversations like this, especially in decision making, in thought process, brainstorming, is where the leaders understanding the dynamics, the strengths of the team members, just to facilitate, like call people out and say, hey, if you have superpower, what would Batman do? What would Spider-Man do? What would and like Star Wars, right? Everyone has their different skills, different strengths. So a leader's job is to recognize that and just pull all these strengths together and facilitate the dynamics of through conversations, through while you're doing your brainstorming to get decision, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great, and I think that we lead on here to where where do you fit in this kind of scale? And I personally love this little infographic in respect of the concept of what a boss typically was and what a leader now is. And I think that concept of being a fundamental part of the team, pulling the weight, being seen to be active, really wanting to be involved in the whole process and lending every element of what they've got and understanding what they don't have. And I think that's, to your point, is really where that level of vulnerability comes in. I think, if you can actually open up and be this idea of transparency with the team really is, it's liberating in respect of what you get as a result, because I feel that then your team are far more understanding of situations. They can be empathetic, sympathetic. Everybody has an understanding of what's going on, and your team is then fully accountable, and you can. Even then, you hold your leader accountable for what they're doing in the same way they would have previously done for you. So we've got this other version, this boss version of that person who's holding you accountable, who's telling you to pull harder, do this, get this, do that, be who's, where's your numbers coming from? These are all conversations that you may be familiar with. But for me, if that person's fully on board and understands exactly what's going on, then they get a really clear way of working that allows a much more authentic kind of discussion and relationship for longer term business understanding and ultimately better results. So
and you can see from this, I love this infographic, this image here we see, right? Are you a boss or a leader? And if you just look at the information at the bottom, right, how would boss behave and how would leader behave? And nowadays, especially if you're going strengths-based leaders, the narrative, the conversations that you have, ultimately you have a goal, and it's a similar goal for a boss or a leader. But how do you actually? It's the how, right? How do you lead the team? Now has evolved and is changing. The needs from your team is changing. Maybe in the past the boss will work because people are just taking orders and say, okay, here's what you want us to do, we'll do. But people more, in our environment now, in our world of information, and people are more knowledgeable, they're more informed, they have great ideas, they want to express themselves, right? The team members want to be able to participate, to raise opinion, to raise ideas, to be part of everything. They want to contribute, so the narrative, the conversation, the how you lead now has to evolve and has to change. Like, you don't have to be the boss who know it all. You want to learn from your team, and you allow your team to teach you. You talk about vulnerability, right? How do you also open up yourself to allow your team to inspire you? And by that, it means inspire you to be a better leader, inspire you to think of better strategies, but it all takes someone to say, okay, I don't need to be this man sitting behind the glass door of my room, and just giving orders to people. It's about how do you be inclusive. I think more leaders now, I see in especially in the tech industry, they are more inclusive. They're playing the role of the leader more than the boss.
It's interesting observation there, because I feel that comes from, I think there's, just the way that the technology industry has evolved over time. I think that, the things have moved on so fast, and you've got the faster paced organizations, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, these kind of guys who lead the whole world in respect of how they actually engage with people and what they promote as part of their day-to-day. And I think a lot of that, people see that as best practice, and they want to be working in a similar way, and they want that factor, because ultimately, and I think this is a great point, is that it attracts the right people. It brings people to you. That culture is so inclusive, and there's actual demonstration of that, as opposed to, let's just say, rhetoric about it, or conversation that says this is what we do, but we don't necessarily follow that through. If it can be demonstrated and you've got a strong working environment, even those, again, that leave the organization ultimately because they may get other opportunities, are massive fans of what's actually gone on in that environment. And I think that that's the element, is to create your sponsors and into the next organization and the next organization, because that not only shows that you've had an outstanding time with that business, but also it means that you then go and take some of the thinking to the table, and more importantly, they then look at that organization and go, "Wow, we should be working with those guys perhaps a bit more closely," you know. So it's just all this thing plays out.
Yeah, and also, Stuart, that you probably have heard that people don't leave organizations. People leave bad leaders. So people have gone into very big organizations and still leave, right? Well, sometimes it's that they go through life changes. They want to do something else, something different. But a lot of surveys have also shown that people actually leave because they have bad managers. Their leaders are bad. I was just talking to someone yesterday, and I told her that, like, I had a leader who, my manager, who was always open, like her door's always open. I can always walk in and share my aspirations, my worries even, or like what I want to do. And I when I was working at Gallup, I spoke to my manager and I said, "Look, I've been a consultant, but I'd like to, here's what I'm thinking for myself." So I don't expect always my leader to think about my development, right? I need to communicate it to my leader. So I told my leader, I said, I'm looking into moving into a hybrid role of consulting and sales. And then, I shared my aspiration, and my leader was open to that, and my leader actually took action. She discussed with others in the team and say, let's look for some opportunities where we can allow Dahlia to get what she aspired to do.
I love that concept of always kind of being in a process, not necessarily immediate necessarily, but having a process of upgrading or being in a space where you can actually improve. Constant kind of assessment of where you're at, what you're doing, and what your next thing may be, what it needs to be. It's kind of that career progression that you need to see in an organization, because kind of if you sit somewhere for a long period of time, then it just becomes one of those moments where that you may be comfortable with that, but is comfortable good enough for yourself, but also for the organization? And I think that those are areas where there's a two-way street in respect to that, but it has to be something which is seen through. And I think that comes down from the leadership stuff is good one-on-one management of that, and good one-on-one infrastructure that allows that conversation to take place. I think these are good in respect of what we don't want is bosses to be impersonal. We need people to make us smile, right? Who are compassionate, who understand kind of where we're going.
Yeah, and by a lot of people actually misunderstand when we talk about, I had a client who asked me, like, Dahlia, should I be a boss or should I be a leader? And I wanted to understand why he asked me that question. And he said, it's easier for me to be a boss, it seems. Why? Because he feels like being a leader, especially to the millennials in his team, he can't handle them. Like, because he felt like he's overwhelmed by all their requests, talking about career progression. And it's only because he's not, it's the generation gap, of course, and he's not used to that himself. Like, he never in his life asked his boss for something. Like, here's my career, aspiration. What can you do for me? How can you look into my development? Right?
It's kind of sad that's the outcome of that. Is that's ultimately the way that individual thinks that's then acceptable to be going forward. It's like this thing. It's interesting because at the pace we're evolving, and nothing more than right now, but when you look at the pace we're evolving and the kind of mindsets that you kind of have to kind of think about and get into, it's amazing that you can be that disconnect. I mean, even with a generational change, I feel that there's opportunity to really understand what you're doing, because even through that hiring process, if you're hiring a level or an age group of people that you need to come through because that's what's got to appeal, then in some ways you kind of got to get, if you're not going to move on yourself in respect of make way for someone who might be more that age group, if you want to be part of that and actually understand the motivations of what they need, then you need to relate to them even more so, and quite frankly, be absolutely part of the ongoing role. I mean, to distance yourself would do nobody any favors, I feel.
Yeah. So my client, this guy, he feels like it's easier to be a boss because you see, if you have 5 people in your team, every single 5 person in your team will have different career aspiration, and for him it's too much work, and he feels that it's not his job. Somehow he kind of feel like it's not my job, it's your personal thing, if you find it out yourself or you work for it yourself. It's not my business, or it's not for me to think about how you're gonna grow from here and all. And he was asking me, like, he felt like it was also taking too much emotional, like because people are asking, and then they're getting frustrated somehow, maybe also, right? He feels like, wow, now I have to not only think about the work, but I have to build relationship, and I have to be emotionally also engaged with my team individually, right? So they get the wrong idea that being a compassionate leader, or being a leader who's open to listen, they feel like almost caring for a baby at work,
Yeah, but in some ways, I mean, like as we're pointing out here, it's that makes the fundamental difference, and it's kind of as the age group changes in respect of what people want, and the millennial workforce becomes the predominant workforce, there's a change in respect of what people actually desire from their motivations for life in general. I mean, there's going to be a fundamental shift in that, and I think, again, part of the circumstances we're going through will help. So a lot of people understand that more readily as to how that really resonates and what that means. But in the real sense, it's just that there is a divide. I think divide's probably the wrong word to describe it. But I think there's something you need to understand about those, how you're going to relate and how you're going to work, and what work means to them. Again, these are questions which are part of the hiring process, and if you're getting the right crew together, then these elements. Strengths is a massive benefit in respect of understanding that. If everyone turned up understanding their strengths, and you get the right team pulled together straight away, right? But if this is part of your culture, and we'll get to that, how you get to that point. But if it's part of the culture, then you can get those wins much faster. So I just think that it's kind of as a leadership role, it's now is your duty to be part of this process and actually understand what it is that you want to achieve out of it. And look, it's not going to be for everybody, this way of working. And maybe it's not, but ultimately the success of every organization, in the same way that digital transformation is now being governed not by the CTO or the financial officer or the CEO, it's being actually controlled by COVID-19. And that's what that's what determined the digital strategy for a lot of organizations. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I think that people, once you wake up to that fact and actually understand that what people have achieved, because quite honestly, some companies have moved heaven and earth and have actually gone forward so radically. It's almost like they've gone light speed to the point of actually understanding where their business is ultimately viable remotely and in a distance working environment. So I think that's phenomenal. So I think if we can make those changes, understanding your people to a level where you're going to get massive buy-in, not only from the organization, but fundamentally for your customers, is critical. So that's awesome. Yeah. So what we're on the next slide, I think we've got, it's just about that concept of boss is not telling you, I want you to do this. It's showing me how you do it. And then that person, I've got this. So in this case, It's an arch.
Yeah,
I don't want to get this image specifically, but anyway, I think it does illustrate the point perfectly.
Yeah, a lot of surveys that I have done in employee engagement, particularly asking people if your leader actually walk the talk.
Yeah.
That is very important. And it's not that it's not that they want you to do their job,
No.
but if that's what you say you're gonna do, you show it to us that's that you're committed to your bond. Your word is your bond. But a lot of times, I mentioned this, a lot of times leaders try to make they focus so much on trying to make their strategy sound so grand instead of focusing the energy on how do I show people how I do this, focus on how am I going to do this. There's a saying also, my teacher say, Dahlia, my coach, he said, Dahlia, people are listening with their eyes. Today, people are listening with their eyes.
Yeah.
So do the talk, and then people will say, oh, okay, if that's what he's doing, then that's what I'm gonna do. And it's not necessary that we're doing the same thing, but you showing me that you're able, to execute what you say. And now I'm more empowered and inspired to believe that what I need to do, or what I think I need to do, or what you say I need to do, I can do it too. Yeah,
it's phenomenal. I think that in the sales environment, you often get in that kind of boss role. There's so many people who are like, oh, back in my day it was easier to close. And we did this, and how we worked with our customers, and I made this many calls or what have you. But those, not necessarily is that the scenario that person's currently in. So, it's always a reference back to what was, not yesterday I closed this many deals or did this. Because, they've kind of divorced themselves from that one role to the next role, and it's up the hierarchy ladder, as opposed to, I guess what's required now is that let's sit down, let's actually work through this thing, find out where the issues are and the challenges. Is it our process that's broken and that we need to fix it? And let's be part of that. So, I'm a big supporter of that. I think, there are skills that we need to have, and I'm big on the modern kind of selling techniques, which I don't see as necessarily as prevalent as they could be in some organizations. But even so, some practical application of that stuff, and actually seeing some people on a phone call rather than being there to kind of be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff should something go wrong. And they're the people who will save the day if there's a problem. That isn't really how it functions anymore.
Yeah.
I'm glad to say that's not the way, but I would wager there's still some companies out there that have that unfortunate end goal.
Yeah, true.
Cool.
So we go into, nowadays, if you hear people talk about being the servant leader or being the steward,
holding up your team, right? Being there for them, understanding, hearing them, and we're going back to that first point of making them be the best version of themselves. And I think that ultimately is where it comes down to for me. But
no, but so my question to you, Stuart, is I'd like to hear from you, right? What are some of the misconceptions of being a servant leader?
Yeah, well, I think unfortunately it's where people go with the mentality of leadership and what it means to them, because some people immediately assume that they're in charge of people, and they're not the support mechanism for those people. And what they are actually, I'll listen to these people, report to me. And that, it's that kind of language, which I think is kind of where the misconception lies. Maybe they behave differently than that, but once you say that, people go, well, hang on a minute. Then they start questioning do I actually report to you, or do I report to someone else, or how's the service line work, whatever. So those are challenges. And I think I've seen that kind of, I guess, from time to time. What I think here is, if you've got, for me, it is about the support. It's about understanding that you're you're in exactly the same position, irrespective of the roles and responsibilities you may have outside of that. But the fact that you can demonstrate what's got to go on, be part of the process, not just necessarily mandate it and then walk away, be actually inside that mechanism to understand how people can work together and rely on you to do that, a part of the puzzle, and actually be clear about what it is that you're going to add to this mix. Then that may be great, because they may not be in a case of they may not have that day-to-day responsibility of running a portfolio of customers, for example. But what they may have is that ability to be part of the routine that they have. Like it's a validation. Maybe it's a video that they make that goes out to all the customers, that's updated on a regular basis, that just gives an insight to what's happening kind of from a strategic perspective inside the organization, some other things that are coming on. Maybe it's observations to the industry, that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that person has to be overwhelmed with a diary of then going to see the same amount of portfolio customers. I'm big on using the technology to speak to that. And I think that has huge cut through, because I think what that then does is it exposes the individual and makes them that leader, makes them more accessible, makes them more real. It actually can demonstrate what they know about the organization, and it shows some real props about where you are and how involved you are in that whole process. So I think that there's some real huge value in that, because I think people get overwhelmed in respect of like, oh my God, do I have to then become a salesperson again, or whatever that means for their organization? If they want to remain in that kind of that leadership role, and people need to see that. But ultimately, they also need to be responsible that there's other ways of doing stuff now that is so critical to be part of, and it adds huge benefit.
And to your point, about when you're a manager, you feel like, oh, you're in charge. And I quickly go on my phone as you speak, because you remind me of what I just saw on LinkedIn, posted by Keith Ferrazzi. He actually says, I'm not sure if you can see this now, but I'll just read it. He says, too many managers rely on their title to get their work done.
Well, and you know what? I don't know if that's necessarily a fault of the individual either. I'm not gonna level this at anywhere personal. I think that what this is just an industry, and maybe just a challenge of promotion people through the business. And is it the right person that are going into those roles who are necessarily in a position to really adopt it in a way which is appropriate for how the organization wants to move forward?
No, it's true. Yes.
I mean, look, I've worked in various structures, and I have to say, I've seen whole swathes of what I would term as middle management disappear from an environment, but then be replaced by others, and that happens successfully, but it's all dependent on how the organization actually responds to that. So I think you've got to have clear mandate, you've got to have clear understanding. But it's very dependent on how the organization actually views and communicates the message, right, of what it means. It's true.
Actually, Peter Drucker also says something about, and I observe this myself, right? In organizations, you're right. What they do is, a lot of time you promote someone to a leadership role because that person performed individually before he or she ever become a leader. That person is so good at it. Okay. So I've worked with a lot of tech companies, right? My clients, I coach the new leaders. These people were promoted because they're very, very good, outstanding developers, for instance, right? And then suddenly they say, okay, we need to have a structure. We need to put someone in charge. And so let's choose the top performer to be in charge. And this person has no experience, no idea how to lead people.
No. And maybe they just want to be that person who's extremely successful in what they do in their niche or their specialty market, right? I think that, I think that there's in the scope of an agile work group. I think there's more case of that succeeding. I see that working well in those spaces where you've got individuals who are leading a team, but in more of a virtual sense as opposed to as a hierarchical sense. Do you understand me? So
Yes,
it's not moving them from a developer role into a leadership role where they don't have access to do both things. I think what we see now in these agile structures and this kind of working environments is people who have leadership qualities certainly and are able to give a sense of being able to be part of that team and pull everything forward. And I think that like in that diagram we showed, I think that that's the kind of quality of individual you're looking for. But I would agree that certainly there's many examples where people get promoted through to roles where they're not happy in that role once they get there. There's perceived value in respect of being higher up a chain. But like I say, a lot of this stuff is going by the wayside. And I'm pleased to see that someone's talking about that because, I see less and less people being defined necessarily by the role they have. I was part of a conversation yesterday where a lady was presenting and she spoke exactly to that, saying that she works hand in hand with her team and like what she's achieved, she could never have achieved in any position. She doesn't look at herself in a traditional sense of a manager or a CIO role, where she looks as she's part of an enablement team that gets stuff done. She happens to be part of the data stuff, and she's fortunate and privileged to be part of the leadership squad that enables those people to do their job. And I think that is hugely powerful, and it's interesting to see that. I also, when we look at these 11 themes here, I know we spoke a bit earlier on this, but it was, for me, this is kind of like if you're working with your customer in this fashion, then I think it's a great slide to actually say, how can I work with my customers in a different way? And if you look at these things, how they show up, I think if you apply those in your mindset of how you want to structure conversations with your clients, then I think you go a long way to achieving some brilliant results with that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, right, leadership does not have to just be you and your team and how you manage your team. If you see yourself as a servant leader, you think about the others before you, right? You think about I like how you say enable your team, empower and enable your team. So you have to serve to enable and empower your team as well as your clients, And in your example of this person earlier, you would see there's no egocentricity, like this. This person is not driven by ego. That I need to be in control, that I need to be in charge, right? So this person would be more aware of where I am and what my people need and what my clients need. So that's the awareness. Also, as a servant leader, what's really key is effective communication. And a lot of time I have seen servant leaders, effective communication is first, the key is listening. It's the active listening to people, to your team, what their needs are, and what are the needs of the client, so you can think of how you can provide support and solutions to your team so they can be enabled to serve the client. So it's always about listening first before you communicate your big strategy or your ideas. Sometimes we're so passionate about our ideas and we want to influence and drive our ideas to our team members, and we forget to think about, is that what our clients really need? Is that what our team really need? So that then comes around empathy. A lot of organizations are still struggling with this. They think empathy is being sorry for someone or being caring about someone. It's about listening. Again, it's about listening to the needs of the people so you can serve better, so you can give better solution. So, the stewardship, and you mentioned about growth mindset, having growth mindset. So every servant leader is so fully aware that he or she, even though you're in that position, need to be very, very open and vulnerable to yourself too, to think, I have a lot of room that I can improve. There are many areas that I need to improve and still grow, and I can only grow that through serving my team, so I can learn more about myself.
Yeah.
The more you serve, the more you grow.
Yeah, well, for sure. But also, when we come back to kind of circle back to the fact of having that strengths understanding of your team gives you that rounded. No one can be fully rounded, as you've pointed out. So the concept is to really fully harness the power of everybody to achieve the end result and to get that complete view. And I think that's amazing. Let's move on to what's the next slide. Our performance, right? So
we're talking about strengths and performance.
Yeah. So anyone who knows me knows I'm a bit of a Formula One fan, and what we're talking about here, I think we came to this understanding that Formula One, from a performance perspective, is probably the pinnacle of most things, short of maybe the America's Cup, and that's getting there. But we wanted to show this, because I don't think there's a better example of a team performing to its pinnacle in respect of a pit crew. And when this goes wrong, it goes wrong spectacularly, right? Because this is where you win or lose. In many short of crashing or running into somebody else, this is the most critical part of any race. So each of these guys that you've got there has a specific task, and they know exactly what they've got to do and how they've got to do it to achieve the ultimate result. And I can watch this a billion times and still not see really everything that's going on here, because if you look at each individual person and what their role is, it's actually phenomenal. Even that guy lifting up the front of the car there, he's fully positioned, he knows what he's doing, and he's away and he's got it all down. So I know these guys train really hard for this. And the guys who do the tires really have the biggest job, because it only takes one guy not to tighten up that nut enough, and they finish, or they don't finish, right? Yeah. So it's last season I think there was 3 or 4 examples of that actually happening, and I felt so bad for the poor guy that's ultimately put everything on the line just for that 1 second and that one job. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then you win or lose. I use the same, Stuart. I use this a lot with my clients to explain why play to strengths, right? I mean, talk about the guy putting the tire. He practices that every single day to make it perfect. 1 second on the dot, right? Yeah. That very second you have to get it right. And working in collaboration, and you have a team member who's not really, that's not really her or his strength, and she or he is struggling, then you also cause disengagement to the person. And that's what you see, it's communication, it's engagement, it's focus, and it's really playing to your role, your specific role and strength. And I would say, this is how it would look like for a high-performing team that is strengths-based, that is very strengths-aware. We know our strengths as well as our blind spots, what we need to take care of. But we play hard to our strengths, and then we can perform together as a team,
It's just occurred to me, there's 2 guys actually holding, in this example, and I don't know when this Formula One, because that looks like a slightly older car in real terms compared for Ferrari, but even so, the 2 guys holding up the car there, see that? Just steadying the car, that's all they do. But they're doing that. And now you have a guy who just cleans the visor and just gives the guys, he just wipes the visor, that's it. But that concept of that being so vital, everyone's role is vital, irrespective of what they're doing, right? So it's amazing, truly.
No, this is teamwork. This is, it's more than what you see. There are more people behind this scene working to help that one person to win the race.
I think what the thing that, so I've been to the Formula One, went last year and went this year, but it was cancelled, which crushed me. But even so, when I went along, and the thing that I could not believe more than anything was, obviously all this stuff was happening. You could see the pit lanes, you could see all this stuff going on. It was amazing. but it's actually how they pack up at the end of it is as much a military position as this is. Everything about the whole sport is performance because of how they're going to move and actually get their guys from one place to another. So it's mind blowing, in fact, how quickly it all packs away and is done. It's literally done it within hours. They've all gone.
Yes, and anyone, I or you, Stuart, like we can only perform when we're at our best.
Yeah.
You can only perform when you're at your best, because at your best you give your best. But what does you being your best mean? And a lot of people haven't really figured that out.
Yeah. This is where
they relate that to they relate to they relate that to maybe more money or happiness. And some people struggle because they're like, I thought I would be happy here. I thought this would bring out the best in me. They don't even know yet, what is the best of them.
We could talk about that one. I think that's a whole nother conversation around being. We'll put that one to another conversation, right? So we get to organizations and high performance teams, and this is what I love. This is where I think it really starts to make sense, because when you've got a team that's performing well, that understands one another, that's got the leader understands what everyone's role is, they understand what the leader's going to do for them, how they're going to be enabled, then you've got the whole situation starts to flow, and you get everybody kind of releasing their superpower and really bringing their A game to the table. And I think everyone will thrive in that environment. This kind of concept of the company's mission it becomes important. You actually align with that. You have support in their development efforts. So basically, when you want to, if you're constantly looking at, you're being vocal about where you are, what you're doing, how you're performing, but where you want to be in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever it may be. These are really important things to understand, because that's what's going to keep you inside an organization and keep your skills sharp and everything else that you need to contribute towards that. Their opinions count, right? I love that. It's just like that everybody's voice is heard. I've seen this time and time again, even with some of the, often it's what you would consider to be previously the most quiet person who never said anything in a room, when they were in a scenario where you didn't quite understand why they wouldn't say anything. But then when they actually start contributing, my God, they got some incredible insights, and that's the beauty of this, right? Opportunities to learn and grow. Well, for sure, everyone can then go, wow, I didn't understand that about you, I'm so impressed that you've got that understanding, or how can I do that better, or how, where can I explore to become that next thing I want to go do. So it's like having those skill sets around you helps you just enhance your own personal perspective, but also how you might leverage the team and then your customer as a result. I think it's always important to think that ultimately, how does this impact what we do as an organization?
And here on your third last point, they can do what they do best every day. Still going back to you being your best is actually do what you do best, right? And you can only, for a leader to be able to have the team to do what they do best every day, it really takes a leader to learn and understand the strength of the team member. Right, the superpower of the team member. This is your strength. You do this, and this is how you play to your best here.
You're also playing to your why there as well, though, right? So this is if you see Simon Sinek's why, and then that's well documented. I mean, we're into sort of 12 years of that, maybe longer, of that particular methodology, but it's so relevant to this whole structure. Once you bounce, if you know and understand your why and your purpose is high, then you bounce out of bed to get stuff done. And I think it just naturally happens. It's not, you don't dwell, you don't hate Mondays, you want Mondays. You begin to hate Fridays because something's coming to an end. how invigorating would it be that everyone bounces up on a Monday morning fully ready to go because they fully understand that the team's behind them, they understand who they are,
Yeah.
how you're going to support everybody. Oh
Yeah,
man,
right. So that's also the role of the leader, to be able to help and enable to connect my personal why to the team's why, to the leader's why, to the organization's why. Why am I here has to connect to why am I with this team? Why am I working with this leader? And then ultimately, what are we doing together for our clients? You know, what's the solution? If that takes the leader's, you know, way and approach and how the leader communicate and help to connect the why. You know, sometimes you don't, you know, people struggle to see that, to feel that connection, or to see that, oh, I'm actually serving my why here. And it only takes a great leader who listens, who understands and who cares, to come to you and say, hey, maybe today is just a bad day for you because you just had a fight with your wife at home, and now you're starting to question your why, you know, and why am I going to work? Why do I feed my children? But this is really your why. Do you remember when I first interviewed you? You wanted this, and this is what you have achieved here. So it really takes a leader to also help one to connect his or her why, personal, individual, his or her why, to the team again, to the mission, the vision of the team, as well as the organizations.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Cool. The next slide.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, yeah. This is a good one. If we could just go back there, because I think this one here for me, when it comes to, you know, ultimately we need, you know, this needs to be linked to the performance of how the business is all going to actually result. What's, you know, the investment that the organization makes in any of these kind of mechanisms really needs to pay some dividends back in respect of enhanced team performance as an entity and how they function, but also what it means for the sales, right? So when you're looking at Gallup's data and where they've gone to, you know, 1.2 million individuals here across 49,000 work units across 45 countries. These are the elements that we're seeing. So when you've got teams that activate their strengths-based development, you're looking at 19% increased sales, which I think anyone would take every day of the week. 21% increased profits. Fewer safety incidents, which I think there's 59% fewer safety incidents, which I think, you know, depending on where your business is, that's got to be relevant for upside and respect of how you can actually trade on that and what you can make of those numbers.
Actually, and for F1, this is important for F1 safety.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you know, fewer incidents is what we're saying, because they don't already want any major incidents. But, you know, I think that the race itself, you can't do much about that. But, you know, like inside the areas which they can control, you know, like the pit stop type of thing, you are looking for that for sure. But the turnover in high turnover organizations, it's lowering that because of people getting that value they want. You know, it's starting to really get their voice heard. All of the things we've talked about, these are massive beneficial numbers to consider, you know, why you might take this on board. So, yeah,
totally. So we talked about, you know, the boss versus the leader. Now we want to look at the individual, right? How employees' perspective has changed today. Also, you know, maybe in the past, my grandfather, my great grandfather, they go to work because they need to feed the wife and the children. So, you know, maybe some people don't even question the why. You know, there's no need for the why. I just need to get a paycheck.
Grateful they've got a job. That's where that came from. It was you go to school, you graduate, you get a job, you stay in the job, you pay your mortgage, you do all of the things. So there's a kind of like this structure's played out, and that's still playing out, right? But I think radically that changes.
I mean, of course, they will go for the paycheck. And especially if they know their purpose and how their purpose align to the organization's purpose, they will ask you for a bigger paycheck. You know, First, purpose. Yeah.
For me, it's which button do you press? Is it yes or is it no? Do you go forward or which one? It's like, I've got the buttons here, so which one do you press? That's what's going to be important.
Yeah. And then also, do I get development here, or I'm just satisfied being here? 9 to 5, I just come and do my work, and that's enough for me. No, more people are looking, they are seeking more satisfaction from growth and development. Yeah. So, where am I going from here? What do I become? I know my purpose. This is the purpose. But how do I get better to serve my purpose? How do I grow with this? Who else can I help with this? So there's also the development. People need development. Talking about the boss and the leader, employees are looking for more of a leader who is like a friend, who is like a coach. You don't always pick on my mistakes and say, here's what you need to change, or here's what you need to improve because you're weak at it. But you want someone who can help and guide you, someone who can cheer you. As a coach, my coach cheered me up, like, Dahlia, you just have that last bit of you in there, do that 50 push-ups, when I feel like I'm dying. But when you have the coach who say you can do it, I know you can. You have a cheerleader, and someone who can say why, what, have a conversation with you instead of go fix this, but someone who can have a conversation. Are you having challenges? What are your challenges? This is what coaches do. What are your challenges? How do we overcome that? Listening, empathize. So that's what people are looking for now, more than a boss, but a leader who cares and also can coach. And as a leader, you add value to the person's life, and also the person's development. Yeah. And then talking about having the conversations like a coach, it also takes one to have a more effective, positive, conversation than the review type of, okay, you did very well here, or, oh, you did very poor here, so no promotion for you. But more around, how do you have ongoing feedback? So it does not, it has to be ongoing. It cannot be only happen only during like a promotion period, or the appraisal, your performance reviews. It's not
those ongoing kind of one-on-one type sessions. They're important, and I think most organizations would have a kind of cadence around that of a once a month, or maybe even once every couple of weeks. But if a leader's part of the process and they're actually immersed in what's going on, then they become a less relevant mechanism to monitor people by. They should almost be, they can be sidelined in some respects if people are really clear on what's going on, because those things don't show up. Now, from time to time, there shouldn't be just one moment where you're then dumping all the information on the desk to say this is what's what. If it's a conversation that's meaningful, ongoing, then that becomes less of a focus. But what I will say is, when you've got that conversation happening, then it needs to have actions, and those actions need to be followed up in respect of the next version of that. There's an improvement, or there's something else, because there's accountability certainly for the individual, but the leaders who are involved in that process really need to take an active view of what's going on there. And I think the more they do that, and they show some genuine understanding and focus in that space, they get massive results as a result of that. Because not everyone's looking for that promotion, right? Or necessarily, not everybody's looking for that. Maybe some people are looking for different things to motivate and drive them. It's not always about money. in respect of a lot of people. You know, like they may not, that may not be their primary driver. You know, maybe it's recognition of what they're doing, or doing something that's meaningful to their value stack, or whatever else it may be. You know, those are the things where if you understand an individual correctly and you understand their strengths, and you understand where they play and how they function, these become way more valuable to that individual. Now, some will just be all about money. So if that's the scenario for you, great. But it's, you know, like I say, have different purpose. And I think that those things are, if they're recognized, then it takes a lot of pressure off that. Just how do we financially compensate this individual?
And I think it benefits more the leader here, having ongoing conversations, giving feedback, and listening all the time actively, like you said, active, right? Rather than you wait you know, over a period of 6 months to look at the performance and go, and as a leader you realize, man, if I had known this before, right, when it just happened, I could have done something, you know. I could have given her the solution and this would not happen, because the performance of your team members, the success of your team members is your success. So conversations, ongoing feedback and conversations, checking in, you know, doing the pulse check with your team members actually works to your advantage more than only for that person, you know, because then you get to see, you're more in touch with what's happening, and you get to see the challenge or the potential issue, you know, that you can really quickly catch and make sure that it doesn't happen, you know, like no conflict, and or you can call out something that maybe the team member you know, cannot see, and it's in his or her blind spot, and that would help you, that would prevent you from damage you know, potentially happening, and you know, and only produce good results, you know, good outcomes. So I think it's not just for your team member, but it is for you as a leader to be constantly actively informed of what's happening with the team. And so a lot of leaders who does the, you know, a lot of leaders who do this well, they actually have regular one-on-one you know, just catch up, you know, like maybe over lunch, or a 30-minute catch up individually with their team members, maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, just to have a quick, you know, sometimes it's just over coffee, or if they're very, you know, focused on health and mindfulness, they'll even do like a, hey, let's take a walk downstairs.
And I think there's huge benefit in that in respect of changing those things up. I think they, you know, become something you look forward to, and I think that if they're promoted in the right way, they can actually be hugely beneficial, rather than seen as an onerous task on both parts. And you see sometimes some people, when they're trying, when they are scheduled to go into today is my performance appraisal conversation, you know, sometimes you just couldn't sleep the night before because you're like thinking, oh, what is my manager gonna say, what is my manager gonna tell me, you know, did I perform well or did I not? I mean, save yourself from all of that, you know. In that scenario, you're generally you're disengaged, right? Because you're that is not promoting the what we've talked about in respect to how it should be. So I think if people are in that mind space, that's a huge indication as to where, you know, if you're running those one-on-one sessions and people are dreading going in there and they're not getting the value, then I think, you know, have a look at strengths and how that might actually underpin everything for you. And getting onto strengths and weaknesses here, we've got this is what we've been talking about the entire time, right? So focus on your strengths. Be mindful of your weaknesses, but not necessarily focus there, because your strengths will always prosper in respect of, you know, getting stronger and stronger in those respects. But look at where you can actually bring in others to add value to the space where you're not as I'm not going to say weak, because I think it's not a weakness thing. I think it's just like less strong.
And you know, like we say, nobody's well-rounded. So if that's not you, that's not you. But then, I mean, in our point, weakness is only something that, you know, if that thing affect your performance. If if it's something you need to change, it's sometimes it can just be a bad habit, that you need to change because that's affecting your performance badly. Then that becomes your weakness, Otherwise, start with strengths because that's more empowering, that's more positive, start with strengths, and then when you able to recognize your strengths and your blind spots in your strengths even, then you're able to manage your weaknesses even better.
Yeah.
Because you're more in full power of yourself, mind, body, spirit, that you say, I know myself very well in this, and I know myself very well in where I'm also weak. Now I can learn. I learned to conquer with my strengths. I learned to conquer my weaknesses with my strengths because I'm more confident now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. What's next?
Life versus job.
Right. It's got to be. Like I say, this whole concept of it being your why and actually what drives you and being in a job which is fulfilling, and because it's a cliche, but we spend more time there than we do at home in many respects. Not right now, but we're combining the two. But in that scenario where we're able to really get the most out of those work environments, and I guess a degree of balance in that. It has to be complementary to who you are. It can't be something that is. I think that this concept of bringing your whole self to work and being that, not being an online, offline version of yourself. I think that those things are all really important in the modern workplace. And I think that, I certainly see more and more evidence that that's becoming the norm, and people are able to show up like that. There's certain industries where I think, it may never change as a result. You've got the more, I guess, the law, for example, and maybe real estate and those kind of places. I think may have a particular expectation of what that individual looks and feels like. But even though, having said that, I think that some of those myths are being blown out as well, because I see people who are really mixing up what that perception is, and I'm glad to see that in many respects. So, I think it is an area where there's more and more opportunity to really bring what your true value is to the table, and not hide your kind of some of the jewels that you have that are part of your makeup. Because once, like I say, this whole thing about strengths lifts the lid off of all of this and allows you to see what's fully there at your disposal. And where I've seen it, when I've worked through this with people and really illuminated what's possible for them, it's amazing. So and that's why Stuart, more and more now that when you go into interviews, if you're a recruiter or you're a hiring manager, one of the few questions, or if you observe, what the person is really looking for is culture. Yeah.
They'll ask you, what is the culture of your organization? If the culture of your organization is all your leaders are micromanaging, that's not the life that I want. I don't want to wake up every morning, go to work 9 o'clock and come out 5 o'clock. From 9 to 5 of my life, every day at work, I'm being micromanaged. That's not the culture I want to be in. And that's life. That relates to life, So culture.
It's interesting to see, that's a brave question, and it just depends on the circumstances you're in, I guess, as to who would actually ask that question. But I believe it's more real in respect of how people now front up for the, because they're going to give over a lot of their time for ultimately the reward that they get out of the role that they take. So I think people are far more open to having that kind of dialogue, and I think that in some cases the organizations that are front-footing this are way more vocal about what that looks like, because even so, a lot of they're trying to, whilst a lot of individuals are looking for organizations that want that where they want that environment and they want them to be leading. A lot of businesses are scared that people that they take on board can't even handle it. They may, they've come from other places which have been way more controlled, and they're going to find it hard to be liberated in that respect.
Yeah, Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's not necessarily for everyone, but the reality is it's becoming more normal. And I
Yeah,
think that, like I say, this circumstance that the world's in right now has really shown that what's possible, and the level of innovation that I've been witness to, certainly in New Zealand, but on the reports I've seen, has been phenomenal. So,
yeah.
it's the mother of all invention. This situation that we're in. So, yeah, phenomenal. But look, we've spoken.
Phenomenal.
All right, so let's get on with the adoption thing, because we're now cracking into an hour and a quarter. So anyone who's staying with us on this, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope it's been worth
Yeah.
it.
So, well, you use the word phenomenal. I like it. So, I as a leadership coach, I really feel like leaders should now start to and it has to start with the most top leaders. Start with the CEO. Like sometimes I have the HR coming to me and say, hey, we need you to coach a few of our team members, their directors or their meet managers, and I go like, my first question to them is your CEO getting coached? Because you want to understand. The reason is not because I want to coach the CEO, not because
No.
I want the business with the CEO. Is it a culture? Is the CEO also someone who believes in coaching and strengths based and all that? Because no matter how much I coach someone and try to change someone, or specifically if the CEO or the leaders say, hey, this is where you need to improve, and then you get Dahlia to help, right? But then there are, you still need, the CEO or your leader to empower you, to support you. And if you don't get that, then it's pointless to have to have a coach like me to help
No,
for
but
6 months.
the ongoing sponsorship of this is needed from that perspective. It has to be a direction that the organisation is prepared to take, to
Yes.
understand the benefits, and is that going to resonate with the rest of the organisation to make us move forward at a pace which is consistent with how our business is looking to track. So
Correct.
this has incredible capability to change things for an organisation, but it does require. It's not that it's not for the faint-hearted. It's just what this requires is some belief and understanding that where you're at today is not where you want to be tomorrow. So you need some mechanism to change that. And I think as a proven entity, this is probably one of the best that I've seen.
Yeah. So start with the CEO. Have the CEO. I mean, my client, our client, when I was at Gallup, the Bank Central Asia of Indonesia, that's Indonesia's top biggest bank, private bank. Even the CEO took the Clifton Strengths Assessment. Even the CEO got coached around his own strengths.
Brilliant.
So we started with the CEO. And then we go down the levels, and then the leaders learn about their strengths. They learn to lead with their strengths, and they learn how to study the strengths of their team members. And that's how you will enable your team to go strengths based, and then you have the strengths based conversation in your performance management, in developmental conversations with your team. And that's how your organization and your business can transform to be more high performing, once you go strengths based. But it's a process. It's not an overnight thing. Yeah.
No, definitely not that. But like I say, it provides insight, clarity, and a kind of it gives that baseline understanding, which then everyone has that common language that we've talked about. That ability to then say, wow, that really strikes a chord with me, because I don't have that, or I have that too. This is why we're either compatible, or maybe we've not seen necessarily eye to eye, but there's reasons for that. So it's like like this good stuff that allows you to be more productive and and win more often, I believe. So look, that's awesome. Well, I think we've talked a long time and covered a lot of ground there, though. So if there's anything that you guys want to communicate with us about, myself and Dahlia are obviously available via this channel specifically, or via LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect with us there, we'd be more than happy to talk to you in that space. These videos will get shared there. So what we'll do is we'll call it a day there, but we'll come back. If there's any more, if there's subject matters that you want to get us in more into, we'll be happy to cover those too. But in the meantime, thanks again, Dahlia. I really appreciate your time.
Enjoy your Good Friday with your family.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Bye.